This is John Dollar of Prayer Builders. Right now we're in 2 Thessalonians. We're in chapter 2. We've been working our way through this. And I've actually been teaching some verses. Some of this stuff, I've never really delved into this. I've never fully taught this chapter my whole life. Shame on me. And if you're another leader out there and it's the same, it's not just shame on me, it's shame on all of us. Because this is what we're supposed to be teaching. We're supposed to be reading. If you are a leader or a pastor or a teacher, you should be reading people God's scriptures. We are commanded. It's our mandate to read people God's scriptures and take them through the scriptures. That's why we're doing this day by day. So let's go ahead and read this. We've been looking at the coming of the lawless one. Let's start reading of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 9. It says, "The coming of the lawless one will be according to the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders, with all unrighteousness and all unrighteous deceivableness among those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth that they might be saved." Now, we covered this yesterday. I am telling you right now, this is so important that you receive Jesus now. Take him as your Lord now. Because there is coming a time that it's not going to be that easy. And you're going to have a whole lot more at stake. And right now, there's going to be more things to just influence all your senses, all your feelings, all of what you see. Because there's going to be power and signs and lying wonders that are being restrained for this moment. And it says this. And those are the things that it says that those people are going to be deceived with all deceivableness. It says in the last half of verse 10, because they did not receive the love of the truth that they might be saved. You know what? There's been many, many people that most people don't get saved the first time they hear the gospel. There have probably been seeds planted and planted and planted and planted. Paul said, I planted, Apollos watered, God gave the increase. That implies that there was a process. It was like somebody somebody would run into a believer here and someone would plant a seed, and they'd run into a believer there. And then somebody might have even said, you really need to see, have you ever received Jesus as your Lord? And they said, no, I'm not ready for that. And then they'd keep running into somebody else and running into somebody else. But there is a time where if you don't receive, there's going to eventually be a time that you're going to come up to the last opportunity. And you don't want to go there. You want to receive, and you want to receive now. And that's what we're going to see here in the next verse. It says at verse 10, "And with all unrighteous deception among those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth." These are people that they were hearing the gospel, but they kept choosing not to receive. They may have even had their heart just kind of squeezed on. It might have really touched them. They might have felt some presence of God move on them. They may have even had tears come into their eyes, and then for whatever reason, they just couldn't do it. They would not believe and receive. And this is a dangerous place to be in, and you do not want to stay there. Do not stay there. I'm just telling you, do not stay there. I'm telling you, Jesus is coming. Don't stay there. And it says, and they did not receive, in verse 10, the love of the truth that they might be saved. And for this reason, God will send or allow. Now look at this. God will send or allow them a strong delusion. Now I'm telling you what's going to happen when the church, part of that is going to be the church being removed. Because the restraining force has been gone. As long as the church is here, God has opposed here on the earth shining the light, restraining this, and being a voice and a constant reminder. God loves you. God wants you to receive him. Jesus died for you. He didn't just die for you, he healed you. He didn't just heal you, he set you free. He set anything that's holding you back right now, he has already set you free. He thoroughly already whipped the devil, the powers of darkness in every area. And it's just a matter of you receiving it and coming out of your jail cell. I mean, that's what it is. And it says, for this reason, God will send or allow them strong delusion. And that's what it's been talking about in these last two verses. There's going to be strong delusion that they should believe a lie. Now I want to read you this. You know, there's always these points. God has dispensations. God has times. There comes a point where God's got to draw. There comes a point where God's got to draw the line, and he's not messing with it anymore. The sin level has filled up. The corruption is filled up, and then it gets to a point that just because God is a righteous judge, he eventually has to act because of all the harm and everything that humanity is putting on itself and doing to itself and doing to each other. And God eventually has to respond to the cry. But I wanted to read, now something you're familiar with, most of you are familiar with, back in Genesis. Now this was when just before the flood was getting ready to take place. That was one of those times where the earth had hit the level that God had to clean the earth out. And there's this point, and I just wanted to read you this verse in Genesis chapter 6, when God was actually, this is part of what God said. And this ended up being part of the message to Noah when he was needing to build the ark. But in Genesis chapter 6 and at verse 3, I just want you to see this verse because this is like this same precedent that we're seeing back in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. The Lord said, my spirit will not strive with man forever. God is not going to keep fighting with you. His spirit, there is a point. You don't want to keep spitting in the face of the Spirit of grace. There is going to come a point where God's not going to strive anymore. And at that point, and now what's happening here, some of this stuff that he's like referring to right now, this stuff that we're actually reading, like in the previous verse, in verse 10, that's all stuff that's happened post-rapture. I'm telling you right now is the day of salvation. God is calling you right now. I mean, this is the Spirit of grace is here right now. God, his Spirit is still striving for you right now. But there is going to come a point where he's not. And it says that he will give them strong delusion that they should be a lie, that they should believe a lie. Well, what's going to happen? He's going to allow that. And the main thing that's going to pop the lid off of that is going to be the church getting taken out of here, which is going to be taking place at any time. And I want to look here. I want to read you one more verse. And this is back in, I just want you to see. I showed you Genesis, and now I just want to show you here in Romans chapter 1. There is a precedent for this. The Bible talks about this more than once. There is going to come a point where there comes a point, if you do not want to be at a point where the Spirit of God's not wrestling with you anymore, not tugging on you, not pulling on you. You do not want to keep resisting him. You do not want to keep, if you're sensing those promptings, you need to give way to the Spirit of God and make the right decision and make it as soon as possible. You need to receive Jesus as your Lord. But I wanted to read you this in Romans chapter 1, because this is the same kind of a delusion. It says in verse 20, Romans chapter 1, verse 21, it says, because although they knew God, this is Romans chapter 1, verse 21, although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were they thankful, and they became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. And it says they were not thankful. They chose not to retain God in their thoughts. And then what's the result of that? Verse 24, therefore God also gave them up to. God gave them up to. And then go down to verse 26. Then it talks about, or in verse 24, it says, in the lust of their hearts, they chose to dishonor their bodies among themselves, who exchanged the truth of God for a lie, worshipped and served the Creator, or the creature rather than the Creator. For this reason, verse 26, God gave them up to. He quit striving. And if he steps out of the pathway between you and what it is that's going to kill you, you have no hope. You get turned over to it. You have no hope. You need to receive Jesus. And then it goes on and it says, this is the end of verse 26, for even their women exchanged the natural use for what is against nature. Likewise also, leaving the natural use of the woman, they burned in their lust for one another, men with men, committing what is shameful, receiving in themselves the penalty of their error. This is talking about homosexuality. This is what it's talking about. And what happened? Did it say that God just judged them here and God burned them up or God killed them or God did all this? No. But there came a point where they kept going and going and going, and eventually there was no more wrestling. And this is eventually going to occur, where there will be and it says down in verse 28, and even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, they wanted to push God from every thought. They didn't want God to have any place in their thoughts whatsoever. And it says, and even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind to do those things which are not fitting. If there's anything, I'm telling you this right now, any good that any man does on this earth, that thought came from God, saved or unsaved. That thought, that influence came from God. The devil would move you to do nothing good and only evil. And we already saw here, I mean, even way back in Genesis chapter 6, that line got crossed. And I just wanted to encourage you. So I know this went on a little longer today, but I just had to cover this. I had to hit these other verses, and I just wanted to show you there's a precedent for all this stuff. This thing is a precedent. And there is back in Hebrews, it says it is a fearful thing to fall in the hands of the living God. We do not want God to give up on us and give us over to all of our evil sexual perversions, evil sexual desires, evil desires and thoughts and lusts and thievery and anything you can think of. I mean, I could go on and on naming off all the works of the flesh. But we don't want to be given up to those. So I'm going to be coming back tomorrow. I want you to go with this note. And I'll tell you what, when this camera turns off, I would strongly suggest, if you don't know Jesus, you need to receive him in your heart. Receive him. Ask him to come into your life. Ask him to come into your life. Tell him. Just ask him. Call out to him. Cry out to him. You don't even need me putting the words in your mouth. It says that whosoever cries out to the name of the Lord, they'll be saved. Call upon him now and ask him to come into your life and save you. And he is faithful and true, and he will do it. And do you know what? Because he is faithful and true, I know this. Jesus is coming back.